Good morning. We're going to get everyone up to the stage and we're going to get started. Hey, Tammy. Good morning. Hey, I'm Alex Williams, founder and publisher of the new Stack. Thank you for joining us at our pancake breakfast. I first want to thank the Cloud Foundry Summit for having us here. Let's give them a big round of applause. We do these pancake breakfasts. We've done them at several Cloud Foundry events. Everyone. Yes, actually, I believe everyone. And they're really meant as a Q&A. And we want to follow up on some of the things that we heard in the keynote yesterday and what we're hearing kind of overall in the world that we all live in, this world of application development, deployment, and management. And so I want to first introduce the people we have on stage. We have Abby Kearns, Executive Director of the Cloud Foundry Foundation. Next on the list is Michael Cote.
Hello.
Marketing Director at Pivotal. Tammy Van Hove, Distinguished Engineer at IBM.
Good morning.
And Udo Seidel.
Hi, everybody.
Tech writer. And I can't read it from here, but I can read it right here. HISA IX.
Very good.
And so, one of the themes that I heard coming out of the keynotes yesterday was this whole idea about the developer experience and the importance of continuing to make it easier for the developer. There was also discussion about Kubernetes, and Craig McCluskey said that he wants Kubernetes to be just boring, and he thinks that's really important, and that Cloud Foundry is really important for the developers because it brings that architecture to life in some respects. But there's also been a lot of change over the past few years we've seen in the community. The rise of Kubernetes is unquestioned, and in the process we've seen the Cloud Foundry Foundation develop projects that I think are very, very interesting. Things like Irene and Quark. And in the meantime, we have this continued interest in the enterprise and what they're seeing in, their interest increasingly in open source and how that plays a role in the development of product and how that relates to DevOps and other practices. So I would like to pick up on that theme, Abby, and perhaps we can start with you and follow up on your keynote yesterday and the discussions you had and what you're hearing from the community out there. And before I do that, I'm going to ask everyone a question here, and then I would love it if you had some questions, because this is really what it's about. And you all have your raffle ticket? Everyone have a raffle ticket? Well, if you ask a question, you get 5 raffle tickets, and we're giving out this really nice Lenovo ultra portable Bluetooth speaker, and we gave one of these out last week at an event, and one of the things that I just found interesting, it's waterproof. So,
Falls off the boat.
Opens up all kinds of possibilities. So put that right there as a reminder. So Abby. Hi. So the question really is about, what are you hearing from developers? And with all this change going on and all the kind of rapid development, what do customers ask of you? What are you hearing from them?
Well, I think community and users in this respect are excited and want to move forward. The intention of my keynote was really to talk about how we're forward-looking. How do we think about the future? Cloud Foundry, by necessity, has to continuously evolve as a technology. That has to happen. But we also have to evolve as a community and an ecosystem. The world has changed a lot, since I began my journey with Cloud Foundry over 5 years ago. We're in a very different world now. And the users and your customers are changing, but the technology is changing. And so for me, it's always about how do we take into consideration where technology trends are going, where user behavior trends are going, and then how do we make sure that we, as a community, an ecosystem, and a technology also continue to evolve.
So what do they ask you, though? Do they ask you about, the direction of the Cloud Foundry Foundation, and if so, what are the kind of questions that they're asking about? Are they asking about Kubernetes? Do they really not? Is Kubernetes just something that they don't really have to manage themselves anyway? They're using a managed service, and they need Cloud Foundry to be more adaptable, or do they not want to, integrate with other technology and just find everything works for them on Cloud Foundry overall?
I mean, Cloud Foundry is a very stable technology, and that's actually been one of the amazing things over the years. We'll be a 5 in January as an open source project. Cloud Foundry overall is about 8 years old, and it is a very mature and stable technology that if you're using it, you love it, which is fantastic, and that's always been front and center as we thought about the evolution of technology. And I know that the contributors in the audience will also agree that continues to be first and foremost. I do agree with what Craig said yesterday, that we should really stop talking about Kubernetes one day, someday, anytime soon, because I think that you're missing the point. Like, why are we all here? We're not here because we care about Kubernetes. We're not here because we care about a platform as a service. We're here because collectively we're solving for larger problems, which is how do we allow users, customers to write code, deploy code into production, and run that at scale.
Michael, you are on the road quite a bit here in Europe.
That's
you
right.
travel weekly, you tell me.
Uh-huh.
And what does business success mean to the people who you talk to out there when it comes to Cloud Foundry Pivotal, or it comes to, just their own application development? And you talk to executives a lot, you talk to developers a lot. What are the questions that you get about business success,
Sure.
so to speak?
Well, I think what, especially in Europe, what most people are trying to figure out is we know there's all these fantastic whiz-bang ways of doing IT and improving our software, basically. So we would like to do those. And they're trying to figure out, there's always, and this is the case globally, there's always a tremendous amount of enthusiasm at the top, for whatever reason, I think in stacks and hierarchies. And so upper management is always like, yes, that sounds great, we should improve our software and do it, and all these things. And then at the bottom, as we were kind of mentioning, at the bottom, everyone's enthusiastic about whatever is underneath there, Kubernetes or some infrastructure thing. So you've got that enthusiasm. But this enthusiasm very rarely meets up. And so people will say, business success would be if we could evolve our in-store shopping app over the course of a year to do all sorts of new functions. But I as an upper-level manager, tell people to do that, and then, it doesn't happen. It trickles down in the organization, and people are conservative, and they don't want to change. And so I think, and then in the meantime, there's a lot of discussion of, again, we need to have a container-based infrastructure down here, but there's something weird going on in the middle where it doesn't really translate to people having that, as you say, business success. So
Is it like a Middle Earth out there kind of thing? There's nowhere
right.
land?
Yeah, it seems like that. But that's the thing that comes up the most is so how, I guess to put it in one silly way, how do we make Kubernetes boring? Because that seems to be everyone wants to talk about that at the lower level, and the top level we're focused on how do we add in features and do things, but that forcing function of boredom, nothing's happening in the middle there fast enough.
So, Tammy, how do we make Cloud Foundry more cloudy and bright and Kubernetes more boring?
So what I hear from customers that I talk about, Kubernetes is their hope is it's the ubiquitous platform, so they don't have to keep doing things over and over and over and learn, new technologies, new stacks, depending on how they're going to deploy applications, and it is a multi-cloud world. And, our enterprise customers, they're very upfront about that. It's a multi-cloud world. So how are we going to, their concern is, how are we going to manage that? And Kubernetes, I think they see as a potential ubiquitous platform that allows them to do that. At the same, on that same conversation, then it's very quickly, we don't want our development communities mucking around in Kubernetes in our infrastructure, because if we're going to manage it as infrastructure, and yes, we do want to manage that because there are policies that are important to us, but we don't want our average developers in that space.
Do they want to be in that space?
Well, there is certainly a role and need for being at that as an operator, being in that space. But then they want to lock it down. They want to make it opinionated for their enterprise, if you will. But what they really want to do is provide ubiquitous infrastructure and consistency and continuity to their developer community. And my experience with Cloud Foundry here is this is the value that Cloud Foundry is really bringing to them. At this point, they almost don't care what the infrastructure is, and if Kubernetes is part of that infrastructure, well, they do. They expect it to be there. But what they really enjoy about the Cloud Foundry dev experience, user experience, is their developers, application developers, don't have to worry about anything else.
So, Udo, you have an interest in cryptography, for example, and security. So you must be pretty paranoid at times about how infrastructure is protected. I mean, is that I don't want to say paranoid, but you have a kind of a perspective out there that may not be about speed and flexibility and cost, but more about resilience and performance, and with security over performance. And so how do you view it out there with Kubernetes becoming the substrate, and then the developer tools that we see, for instance, the strength and longevity of Cloud Foundry?
Yeah. Well, I used to be paranoid, but I'm not anymore.
You're not?
Yeah,
Okay.
not anymore. Yes. Yeah.
Reformed.
I'm grown up now. For several reasons. First of all, it's also trust in the technology. So, and when technology or software projects, when they get mature, you trust them more, and then you also trust the policies, the rules, securities they put in place there. Plus, there's also a shift upwards in the stack, and it's not only on the business side, it's also on the security side. Yes, you still have to provide some basic security on the lower levels, but you have to focus much more on the higher levels. Plus, in today's world, globally distributed, there's no other choice. You have to adapt, and the old paradigms in security, they don't apply anymore. You have to change things, and this is happening. So, but to cut a long story short, I'm not paranoid at all. I fully aligned with what was said before. So infrastructure has to be boring. People should forget about it and should focus on the daily business, which would be developing applications or something for developers. Or on the business, which is more for the mid-management and then business people. And infrastructure, and even platform, I would say, is just a vehicle, enabler for actually solving your customers' problems or solving your business problems. And security is an integrated, natural part of it.
So I have this Lenovo Bluetooth speaker, and I'm just reading a little bit more about the features here. It takes 2 hours to charge, but once you charge it, it has a battery life of 12 hours.
You want this.
Yeah, he's encouraging you to ask these questions.
It has voice assistant compatibility. That's both good and bad, I think. And it supports Windows 7 and Windows 10, Android and iOS. So who has a question?
That convinced me totally, so I'm going to go for one. So, panelists, when you look at the Cloud Foundry programming model today, what do you think, do you think that there are any inhibitors as of capabilities? Like you said, upper management always wants to have the next set of features, right? And when we translate the very same question to the Cloud Foundry ecosystem, do you see any gaps? Do you see any improvements that can be made, that could be made to broaden that scope and actually drive the platform to the next level?
Well, I think to answer the question one way, I guess by definition that's always one way you answer a question. I think this is a little self-serving because I work at Pivotal, but over the 5 years that I've been there, we have plenty of customers who run actual things every day on it. So the capabilities are there and they're fine. And I think the rate at which things are added, and people seem happy with it who use it. And I think, and this is kind of my area, it's not so much the pace of capabilities or what gets added is deficient as I think maybe as technologists we don't realize how slow organizations are to change, right? Like in the keynote yesterday, I forget the exact dates, but Daimler was saying, we started in 2017 and now we have 50 apps running in production.
Fast.
Yeah, and from a technologist standpoint, it's just like, well, what have you been doing this whole time, right? Like, that's a very small amount of applications you have running. But again, when you sort of understand the machinations or how these companies work, like it can take a year just to say, like, we have an agreed on definition of what a container is. And so, like, I think more of the capability that you need to have for any type of enterprise platform is the capability of, like, patience to just constantly be engaging with the people actually using it and be sort of understanding that it's going to take them a long time to not only switch out their infrastructure, but then actually do something with it.
It's a cultural change as well, yeah, an organizational change, yeah.
The capability of patience. I've heard people talk a lot about this, actually. You need to be patient, especially when it comes to open source, doesn't it, Abby? Like, I mean, you know this, like just trying to convince people that open source actually can be very effective.
I don't think I ever have to convince people that it's effective. I think I have to convince
Or actually just
people
doing
to
it.
stay engaged. And, open source is, I often think of it a lot like an enterprise because, and this has been a really good learning opportunity for me because by my nature, I'm very impatient. And so it's been a really good forcing function to say, okay, we've had these conversations and the technology will eventually unfold in that direction. And I think we're seeing a lot of change, though, within Cloud Foundry and the technology, particularly in the last year. A lot of new projects, a lot of new ideas are starting to really bubble up that are changing a lot of the fundamentals, and that's exciting. I thought, Simon, your question was really interesting around, are there feature gaps that we have? I don't know necessarily that it's feature gaps. I do think I do feel like this, and I'm going to kind of go off question here just a little bit, but I feel like PaaS is oddly now coming into its own.
Yeah.
Everyone is talking about how, it's legacy, it's dead, we're all moving to this next new thing, whatever that next new thing is. But realistically, what are the conversations you're hearing? You're hearing people start talking about, actually, I need a developer experience. I need to be able to write code and deploy this. I need to scale this. Oh, wouldn't it be great if we had logging and metrics and identity management and security? If only there was a technology thing that did that. Wow, it would be great. And so I feel like we're coming full circle back to both relevancy for a platform like Cloud Foundry, but also we're also at this weird crossroads where the technology also has to evolve to accommodate a lot of emerging technologies. And so it's this bit of a mixed bag situation.
What are the gaps, Tammy, that you feel like sometimes you wish would be taken care of? Like that you're like, see this gap and you're like, oh, that is such a gap. And is that the platform as a service? Is it that kind of reemergence of platform as a service that's needed?
I think, as Abby says, that reemergence of platform as a service is real, and clients are looking for that in a more general sense. So, like, one of the gaps, I see is there's a stack for everything, and every stack has its experience, and at the speed at which clients don't move, or we think they should move faster, that's an inhibitor. I think is it's a constant. They can't train or they can't educate their developers on one experience to get the most out of the stacks that they're deploying. And so there's I think that developer experience gap is real. And if you look across the technologies that have been emerging these last couple of years, Kubernetes and functions, and Cloud Foundry has this really nice experience. And I hear all the time, I just want my CF push. Can I just have that everywhere? So I think that's a very real gap that people are looking at addressing. We certainly are within our teams, and clients are asking us for that. And what does that mean across all these technologies? What's that going to look like?
Questions?
I was thinking to help you out, you could use that in the shower to listen to this recording.
Yes, you could. I was wondering about that. I mean, is this actually something you want to have in the shower? I don't know.
I was thinking more on the boat. If it falls over, it floats. You can still grab it.
That's true. In Portland, it can be very effective in the rain. Questions, anyone? Oh, here we go. We have 2 questions over here.
Hello, good morning. So I work as a sales engineer for SUSE, so I talk with a lot of customers in Germany especially. And I'm wondering for business success, especially for the business success or for the success of Cloud Foundry, because when I talk to customers, only like 20% can be addressed with Cloud Foundry because these are the customers who want to build and run it in the same place. But there's a big market of people who want to build runs and run it in several clusters around the world, but they still want to use a PaaS for it. So my question is, how will Cloud Foundry address the change now? What's happening? Because people are used, because of containers, to build runs and deploy anywhere or multiple times. How this can be addressed in the future to be successful with Cloud Foundry?
I'm not sure I understand the question. So you're asking how Cloud Foundry, from a technology standpoint, is going to address the build once, run anywhere? Well, today it can run on any cloud. So we got that going for us. I think the tech is going to continue to evolve. I would ask that question of you as a contributor in the community. How is it going to evolve? What's it going to look like in the future? I think we don't know where we're going to end up over the next couple of years. Projects like Arini and Quarks give us an inkling of how things will unfold, but I think it's entirely up to the community to see where the technology goes from an open source standpoint.
Well, maybe that's a good beginning because, if you look at something like Diego, it was meant to, it had a specific purpose. And now there's the option Diego or Kubernetes to be used. So the question, I guess, is like, how did that evolve? How did that project, evolve? How did it become a relevant project for the Cloud Foundry Foundation?
Well, I'm looking to the left a little bit so I can see Jules's face.
Jules.
Who was basically shepherded a lot of the work on Arini. I think, and SUSE did a lot of the work on Quarks, and I think that's why I really posited it goes back to the community. Where do you see this technology going? The use cases that you see as a SUSE sales engineer in Germany are very different maybe from what a sales engineer in Northern California would see. And so I think that's the opportunity of open source, where we get those different perspectives in, that get those different use cases, and you contribute those ideas back to the backlog, and it turns into features and projects and the evolution of that technology. That's why we're all here, because that can happen.
So when you're out on the road, Michael, and you're hearing from customers, how do you get a sense of how projects are doing and how open source projects are doing when you talk to customers? Or do they just have no idea?
You like the health of various projects?
The health of various projects or the relative understanding of the various projects?
Yeah, I think with technical people, there generally are many opinions about which project should be used and not. And I think over the years, I don't know. I've been like watching tech stuff for like 20 years, and I think there's a similar pattern that emerges that still does, which is there's the technology people. These sort of like mythical developers who are always frustrated, who want to like mess with our stuff and like build their own infrastructure.
How they became mythical, I'll never know.
Oh well, they're just probably not here.
That says it all.
Some other event, but there's often like, because of the positive spready nature of like open source stuff, it means anyone can try it and try to get up and running, and so often those opinions of what projects you're using and not using, they come up from the bottom, if you will, and so yeah, there's always a lot of anything that's like container based and that basically you don't have to pay for is very healthy people like that, very much so.
They like free? That's so weird.
Yeah, exactly. And more of, from the other angle, from the top, if you will, which I don't know if that's an angle, but from the top, yeah, there's not really that much caring about exact things. It's more like I've heard this Cloud Foundry thing is good versus that Kubernetes thing, but then why wouldn't I just run over here? So it's broader directional choices that people need to make. Not really like, I like this version of this project because they introduced this feature, and if you read the release notes, that's totally bogus. It's not going to work out here and there. More people from the top level want to know, like, I'm thinking on a 12 to 24 month cycle where I'm going to allocate, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of euros. So, like, I need to make a gigantic big choice about something, never minding how many stars are in GitHub or anything.
Devin Davis is our co-host this morning. He has a microphone. Maybe, Jules, you could just provide a little perspective. Like, how did this project evolve?
Sorry, Jules.
We're just going to give you the mic.
I wasn't prepared for this.
I think he gets the speaker.
Okay, who wants to hear about Brexit?
It's breakfast time. No, thank you.
Brexit means breakfast. Okay, one question I have. Do we need to... The word, I feel like the word PaaS... the word PaaS has now got so many weird associations with it. I think we're now, like Abby was saying, there's now this whole, I think everyone has now come to PaaS, right? The Kubernetes ecosystem, everyone's now talking about how do we do developer experiences, all these things. But they're not saying PaaS, right? They're not using the word PaaS. Some people are using the word serverless, but let's assume we all agree that's not a good idea. Is there a missing word for this movement around high-level abstractions, cloud-native programming, etc., that speaks to me as a developer as opposed to an operator? Right? I never wanted to spend my life, don't tell anyone, I never wanted to spend my life doing containers and container schedulers and all of those things.
I have some
wanted
bad
to build
news for you,
stuff.
Jules. I have some bad news for you.
Yeah, I mean...
You want to add another
that frog
word?
boiled slowly, and here we are, right? But if you see what I mean, right?
I agree. I think
there a
that's
new
the
word?
problem
Do we
is
need a new
people
word?
get hung up on the word, and I don't think we have a good word right now for what this is. But the point I was also trying to make is that everyone's like, oh, that's so legacy. Like, no one cares about a PaaS.
Heritage.
It's like, it's garbage. Why would you do that? Now let's talk about how I can get a developer experience. And by the way, I need some logging, some metrics, identity management, security would be really cool too. And let's, how do we put this all into an opinionated platform? I think if we just described Cloud Foundry and didn't use the words, people are like, I want that.
It's almost, imagine like if we were trying to start a service mesh, but we actually called it an enterprise service bus, like it is, right?
Yes.
Like people, I don't want an enterprise service bus. That's from 10 years ago, right? You needed a new word, service mesh, right? What's the new word for PaaS? That's my question.
Well, I know one thing in covering this industry for 10, 15 years, there's always the demand for a new word. There's always a question about, does the new word fit? Does it make any sense?
Maybe that should be an outcome of today. We should do some kind of like little phone text survey. Okay, let's rename PaaS. What would you call it?
I know there was one more question over here that we didn't get to, right? Yeah. You just to say your name and company, it'd be helpful.
Sure. I work at Pivotal. I'm Wouter. I'm an engagement director at Pivotal here in the Benelux, working actually at clients, at customers, and dealing with a lot of those teams. We see at a lot of customers where there is this urge for autonomy of teams, right? That they can freely make choices. And then we sometimes match them up with our opinionated platform. How do you guys see those two things work together?
Tammy?
Platform of choice and then the opinionated platform, is that?
Yeah, like, well, we were just
Yeah.
saying, right? Like,
Yeah,
there's a lot of
so-
opinionated paths to create this speed, yet
There's
enterprises are also telling developers, you can do whatever you want if you work with us, right? We're a big, bad enterprise, but it's really cool to work here.
Yeah.
But just hang on with CF push. How do you see that balance?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a challenge going forward. And again, with the technologies that are emerging, around functions, containers, and applications, and it's not a one size fits all. It's not a one. All apps should be written this way, and so that's one of the challenges, that we're trying to address and leveraging, open source for, and it kind of falls into this developer experience. Whatever language, whatever application model you're familiar with or coming from, you can consume containers, you can consume functions, you can consume. You're just going to put an app onto a platform. I don't want to say PaaS, but you're going to put an app onto a platform, and so you can leverage the skills and consume the new technology, so you continue to grow as an enterprise. So it's not an either or. It's like last year we talked about there was a lot of discussion about Cloud Foundry versus Kubernetes, and now we're Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes, right? So I think that kind of a mindset will continue to grow, and we've got to figure out as a community how to address that.
Yeah, I think I don't know, there's maybe at least 3 types of developers. There's like one, the developer who like really should be not wanting to work on containers for the rest of their life and like works on the platform of the PaaS or whatever. And then there's also the developer who has a job and they enjoy programming and they'll sort of like go along with whatever the standard is. And then there's the third one who's like really annoying. And you basically have to like trick them into helping themselves. and I think they might be a very small minority, but they're very loud, which is to say they direct policy. I don't know what you would call it. They direct the ship, to be metaphoric. And I think that's why we have this struggle with what to call this, because if we call it PaaS, those annoying developers immediately don't want to use it, right? Like, it's almost like, hey, here's something that's really helpful for you, as described. It solves a lot of your problems. And they're like, that sounds terrible because you said it. And then they want to go do their own thing. So to a large extent, you have to, and you'll see this happen in organizations where often they won't say what they're doing is their Agile initiative. They'll be like, this is our cool, named after some Simpsons episode initiative, or like with the U.S. Air Force, they use Star Wars things in all caps to name things, and so often, and then also with a platform, maybe you don't call it a PaaS. You're like, this is our super cool, Star Trek thingy that is our own thing that we've worked on, and if you pull those developers into helping co-create it with you, then it's their idea, and it's easy to help them out. But oftentimes you have to launder helping a developer through this screen of confusion, so they don't think you're helping them, and instead they're helping themselves.
So Udo, what do you hear? You talk about to people all the time about this PaaS kind of story. Are you seeing PaaS more interest in it? Are you what are you, in your reporting and interviews and with people?
Yeah, depending on the people I talk to, I hear all the different opinions we have already heard about. So there are the people who talk about technology and they talk about PaaS or platform, and they get hung up with the word and either like it or don't like it. There are other people who concentrate more, yes, I just want to develop and I go along with whatever I get, or I want to do business and I use all the technology or what's out there. I don't care as long as I get profit, if I can pay my employees and things like that. And there are people very passionate, and some of them are good because they drive things forward and they can also steer the ship, to use your analogy. And there are also the loud people who are just against anything which kind of seems to be trendy or new. So I meet all sorts of people, and my way out always is try to first listen to them, to give them a platform to voice whatever they want to voice, and then trying to steer away from using particular buzzwords or keywords, and then talking about requirements, what do you need, what do you want to achieve, goals, could be technical goals, could be personal goals, could be business goals, and this works most of the time. But yeah, every new interview, every new publication might be a challenge. But it's in circles, so it's all in waves. It comes back.
One quick last question before we go. Anyone have a quick question before we finish up? Well, One question. Anyone?
I don't think they're awake yet.
Well, so then, well, we're right at 20 up, so we can end it right here. But so I want to thank everyone for participating in the discussion today. Abby and Tammy and Udo and Michael, thank you very much for participating, and thank you all, and have a great show.
Thank you.
And it's time for the raffle. So, Abby, why don't you
Sorry, I just dumped water all
draw
over
from the
myself.
hat?
Need to pull out my stuff as well.
574883.
Yeah!
Wait, I think those were my 5, right, Jules? I left mine on the table.
Have a great show. Thanks again to the Cloud Foundry Foundation.
He deserves it since he got the impromptu.